Hi guys, I'm Mia, a princess from, of course, not the kingdom of far, far away, but another relatively small country in Europe, which must not be named. That was a Harry Potter reference, in case you didn't notice. Anyway, before I tell you my amazing story, like and subscribe, please? Nah, that's an order.
Your Royal Highness, please come down here!
In your dreams! Guys, just admit it. You've also dreamed of being able to fly far away with lots of balloons. At least once, right? I'm living your dream right now. But just as I was enjoying the fresh air, actually, the air was kinda thin up here. Anyway, out of nowhere, a flock of birds from the opposite direction flew straight into the balloons. One, then two, then three, popped!
Catch the princess!
No! I cannot die like this! Ah! So, at my funeral... Just kidding! Did you seriously think I died? I didn't, but instead I was immediately taken to the palace in front of the king and Mom, who wasn't very happy with what I just did.
How could you do something reckless like that? Did you forget who you are? Your Majesty, please reprimand her properly so she would not repeat this sort of behavior. That's right. How could you be so careless? Next time prepare more balloons, or at least let me join you. Your Majesty!
You all know who sides with who now. Growing up, Dad would let me join him in his hunting adventures, but we actually never hunted anything. Instead, we would explore the beautiful sceneries together and learn interesting survival tricks. Those hunting trips called the deepest passion for adventures inside me. But of course, Mom only wanted to keep me inside the palace. It's too dangerous. Mia, remember who you are. Or, what's your manners? But I couldn't care less about her because Dad always got my back. But everything changed when I was 15. Dad suddenly had a stroke, then fell into a coma. Mom ascended the throne, and my life officially became hell on earth. I'm not even blowing it up. I was not allowed to laugh out loud, eat too much, or even leave the palace anymore. She was so paranoid that she even insisted I have a bodyguard. One day, I was reading a book when the sleepy monster came to visit me. So I asked my bodyguard to play my favorite game with me. Let's take turns naming words starting with the letter B. Whoever loses will have to do a handstand walk around the palace. I'll go first. Bite. After a few rounds back and forth, we started running out of words starting with B.
I have a word, but I can't say it.
Oh, come on. Say it or I'll have you fired.
But...
Right then, Mom came in out of nowhere and immediately fired him just because of using improper language.
What choice do I have, really?
I tried to negotiate with Mom to let it slide, but she was impossible. So I had another bodyguard, who just moved here from the North Pole. Negotiation wasn't even in his dictionary. One time, I wanted to try this Peter Parker battery experiment, but knowing my bodyguard would never allow it, I asked him to go buy me a chocolate shake. So here I am, ready to become the next Spider-Man. Warning, do not try this at home. Yeah, I'm talking to you all. So anyway, the experiment was quite successful, but my new bodyguard was also fired shortly after. He didn't even know I was doing this. It was my fault this time, Mom. Mom! Then, after a short while of many other recruitments and reconsiderations, the Queen finally found another bodyguard who, according to her, had given up her noble position in the royal family to train in the army. You will learn a lot from her, yada yada yada. Does her name happen to be Mulan too? But the moment I met my new bodyguard, I thought she was Miss Universe in disguise. Skin as white as snow, lips red as the rose, and hair black as ebony. She looked as fragile as Snow White. How was she meant to protect me? I guess I have to test her then. Come at me already. Before I could process, she rushed towards me faster than the speed of light, and I instantly found myself locked in.
Your Royal Highness, I'm Grace. I'll be your bodyguard from now on.
Got it. Now could you release me? I was finally freed from her grip. So, Lady Grace, is it true you gave up your title to train in the army?
That is true, Your Royal Highness.
Just call me Mia. Anyway, why did you do that?
I just wanted to follow my martial arts dreams without any restrictions.
Grace and I talked some more, and I found out she was actually very pleasant to be with. Over time, Grace and I became closer. She was excellent at her job, protecting me from any trouble I caused for myself. But whenever she could, she would also try to bring me along with her on palace duties. She knew how much I loved to be outside the palace. Everything was better with Grace, until one day after I turned 17, the Queen summoned me in to announce a life-altering news.
According to the Royal Covenant, as soon as a princess turns 17, her engagement ceremony is to be held.
What? Engagement? There's no way I'll get married at the age of 17 or 18. And should I at least know the name of the unlucky guy? Right then, a guy stepped in.
Nice meeting you again, princess.
Liam, the Duke from a neighboring country? I met him before through some royal parties. Oh gosh, he smelled like he just soaked himself in 1001 bottles of Dior Sauvage. I mean, look at the way he stroked his hair or applied chapstick. My stomach was literally on strike seeing all of this. Ugh! No, I will not marry anyone. If you guys insist, I'll go on a hunger strike. Only, I didn't know hunger strikes require a great deal of mental strength, which I don't have. After skipping lunch, I almost passed out already. Luckily, Grace sneaked in some food for me. Thank you, thank you. There's no way I'm gonna skip my 2 p.m. chocolate shake either.
I understand what you mean, Your Highness.
It's all because of that stupid Liam guy. Did you see how he acted? He looked like a donkey.
Actually, I used to attend some royal classes with the Duke before I gave up royalty.
Oh yeah? I bet he failed all the classes. There was no grace in that man.
No, he was actually very smart, and he cares a lot about others. You know, a lot of girls in the classes were dying to get with him. So maybe you should just give him some time, Your Highness.
All right, as long as you get me my chocolate shake. It seemed like the hunger strike really worked, since the next day the queen came into my room looking all worried.
Mia, have you seriously not been eating?
Yes, Mom. I can't get married. Right then, Marcus, Mom's private secretary, came in, interrupting my marvelous acting.
Your Majesty, please consider joining the charity program in the Southern Village. I said I will not go! But I'm afraid since the king became unconscious, the royal reputation hasn't been as good as it used to be. Having a member of the royal family there would help.
Ooh, a charity program in the Southern Village? This screams my ticket to freedom. If I go, I could at least delay the stupid marriage. Plus, I'll get to explore the village. Your Majesty, perhaps you could allow me to join the charity program on behalf of the royal family?
That is too risky. Actually, having the princess there would also help promote her image as well, given that she is the next in line to the throne. But,
Mom, this is the only way to lift my gloomy dying spirits.
All right.
Thank you, Mom. This is what a high IQ will get you in life. It seemed like the engagement ceremony with Liam would have to wait, because I, the princess, am setting off to save the world. But man proposes, God disposes. When I arrived there, everything was really programmed. Everyone was dressed up, holding flower bouquets, and standing on both sides of the road welcoming me. As soon as they saw me, they all started applauding. I haven't even done anything praiseworthy. Oh wait, should I smile or should I grin? How many teeth should be revealed? Oops, I forgot to check myself in the mirror this morning. Is there any lipstick or veggie stuck on my teeth from breakfast? Suddenly, I noticed a boy with a bouquet of deep red roses looking at me curiously. Are those for me? Thank you very much. No? I guess they're for your mom then. I patted him on the head, stopped to all these behind-the-scenes bloopers. As I continued walking, I saw a well-groomed gentleman wearing a hat in front of me. Did the locals here even prepare a moonwalk performance to welcome me? That's so thoughtful. But as I was about to approach, he reached out to stop me and lifted his hat, revealing a cheesy smile. Wait a second. I think I'd seen that smile somewhere else before.
Buongiorno, Principessa. Here we meet again.
Liam? Why are you here?
I don't know if you've heard it before, but there's a Chinese proverb that says, if it be fated, even 1,000 miles cannot keep us apart.
Ugh, I've come all the way here and still can't seem to escape this guy. I'm sure Mom was behind this. So you must also know the other saying in Chinese. But if it not be fated, we shall not encounter each other, even if we are face to face. Even after I literally spelled out, I do not wish to see your face like that, he still didn't bat an eye and continued acting cheesy. He even messed around with Grace, too, making her all embarrassed. I had to save her out of there. Just ignore him. I thought upon coming here, I would be free to wander around to explore the surroundings and meet up with new people, but
without the Queen's approval, Your Highness is not allowed to go out.
Then for food, we were served with all different kinds of exquisite cuisines. So, are we doing charity or on a vacation?
Yeah, right. How can the two of us finish all this food by ourselves? You should join us too.
That's right. Everyone come join us.
We can't, Your Highness.
Okay, either you all sit down or I'll have you fired. That's the power of being a princess. So, turned out life here was no different from back at the palace. I had to participate in loads of charity duties that didn't have anything to do with charity at all. Worse still, I couldn't even enjoy my snooze privilege anymore. Rise and shine, princess. Today's schedule begins with breakfast at 7 a.m., accompanied by the Duke, followed by an interview with reporters at 8 a.m. At 10:30, Your Highness and the Duke will deliver gifts to residents of the lodge and take photos with the President and First Lady of France. Then at 11:30, all right, at least let me go squeeze the cheese first.
No, Princess, we don't have any cheese for today's breakfast. If I'm not mistaken, the breakfast menu includes...
No, Grace, I mean I gotta go bake a loaf, plant some corn, I need to go to the bathroom ASAP. Well, breakfast was ruined because of Liam. If it wasn't for Grace, I would have jumped over and torn him apart already. But now I still have to endure this terrible human being's company for the interview.
Let's take a beautiful photo of the princess and the duke together.
I angrily looked into the camera while Liam grinned stupidly. Ugh, you guys just want nice pictures of me and Liam? I immediately posed in 101 different positions. Everyone's face went from surprised to confused to speechless. Princess? My short-lived spotlight was suddenly taken when Liam also started crawling on the ground and posing like a Zara model.
Hey, what are you waiting for? Take as many photos as you want.
Did he really go that far? After a whole day of taking photos and interviews and being pretty and breathing, I was exhausted. But I still need to attend this dinner with the President and the First Lady of France. I tried to follow along with the conversation, but soon, all the laughter and chatter around me slowly faded away. Then I suddenly saw myself turning into a rabbit, running free around the carrot field, hanging out with my turtle friend. As I turned around to look for him, a farmer suddenly appeared and lifted me up. Ah! Turned out the farmer was Grace. Oh? Did I say something funny? Ahem. Right when I was staring daggers at Liam, he suddenly turned serious.
Please excuse me. I suffer from a condition called laugh-a-lot from a young age.
What is laugh-a-lot? How come I have never heard of it?
Oh, only about 0.01% of the population suffers from this, so it's not common. People with laugh-a-lot syndrome have no control over their mouth and jaw muscles, or when to laugh.
Oh, I understand. I'm so sorry about that. You're still so young. I tried so hard to hold back my laughter. How could the First Lady not figure out Liam was just messing with her? It's been a few days and all I did was eat, sleep, and take pictures. I've had enough. One morning I called Grace in. The past couple of days have been exhausting and I've not been feeling well. I'm just gonna rest today. Don't let anyone disturb me.
I understand, Your Highness.
I should have done this sooner. The front gate was heavily guarded, so I had to sneak out from the backyard. But why was this wall so high? I was about to climb the wall when suddenly I heard a rustling sound below. Huh? A dog hole? Man, I'm in this too deep already. There's no going back. I tried to squeeze through, but I might have had a little too much fruit for breakfast. Come on, you got this! Phew! Finally, I took a deep breath. So this is what freedom smells like. I followed the road ahead and soon saw a village in the distance. I excitedly skipped towards it, but I suddenly stepped on something that I hope was not man-made. Well, it wasn't man-made, but horse-made. When I was figuring out what to do next, someone passed by. He was tall and handsome, just like a male character walking straight out of a Japanese manga. But why does it have to be in this embarrassing situation?
Hi guys, I'm Austin, and I'm a 23-year-old college student. I guess my school years went by pretty smoothly, as I had my best friend Jake by my side. When we're not partying and living large, me and him would work part-time at this local restaurant. The pay was pretty dismal, but it funded some fun nights out at least. My story starts as many do, with a cute girl. And I'm talking Ariana Grande pretty. Me and Jake first spotted her one day in the coffee shop that we always dropped by on our way to work. Neither of us could quit staring at her. She must have noticed us too, as instead of leaving, she turned back, smiled in our direction, then walked over to the counter and ordered another drink to go. She was obviously doing this because she wanted to talk to me, so I rushed over there to start a convo. The problem was Jake tagged along too, and offered to pay for her drink. Ugh. She seemed flattered, smiled, then thanked us both. Then I was about to ask her for her number, but she rushed off as she said, "Gotta go, my Uber's here." It was such a bummer. All I knew about her was that she was the hottest girl ever, and her name was Darcy. Well, that was the name written on her takeout cup. Feeling a bit deflated, me and Jake walked back to our table. But as we passed the table she'd been sitting at, we saw a phone. I presumed it was hers, and she left it there, so I lunged for it before Jake could. He looked so annoyed. Ha! Now the chance to see her again is mine. The phone was locked, but I was sure she'd call any minute now. I wanted to wait for her to come back and look for it, but I had to get to work. I kept the phone in the pocket of my apron throughout my shift. Just in case she called, and also so Jake wouldn't get his hands on it and try and steal my girl. During our break time, I sat down with Jake and we looked at the phone for a bit. Yeah, I know it was locked, so there wasn't much to see. However, even on the lock screen, we could see there was a picture of a brunette girl. Why would she have another girl as her wallpaper, though? Could this be her girlfriend or something? Nah, I seriously needed to quit overthinking. I'd seen the way she smiled at me. She totally liked me. This probably was just an old picture of her when she had brown hair. Finally, as I was finishing my shift, the phone rang. I cleared my throat, then in my sexiest voice answered with a, "Hey there." Only to my surprise, she started screaming at me, calling me a thief. I tried explaining that she'd got it all wrong, and I'd meet her at the coffee shop to settle things down. She sounded so cranky, and not at all like the mild-mannered girl from earlier. Then again, I would have acted crazy too if I lost my phone. After the shift, me and Jake walked back to the coffee shop, and as we approached the place, I pulled out my phone and called the number earlier to ask where she was waiting. But then I saw a big guy pick up his phone instead. I was terrified, so I shoved Darcy's phone to Jake and told him to go return it. He didn't know anything and excitedly grabbed it and ran over, only to be stopped by that guy in front of the coffee shop. He asked, "Aren't you the one who stole my phone?" Jake was puzzled and looked at me for help, and we just mumbled out that it wasn't, that it was some pretty girl's phone. She left it behind, so we thought we would find some way to give it back to her. Then the man said, "No, it's not any pretty girl's phone. Don't be sly. We've looked at the CCTV and saw what you did. It was a mess. So are you telling me that we couldn't see our dream girl again, but be caught up in this stealing chaos instead? This sucks." Things got even worse when this big guy put Jake in a headlock. Luckily, a woman walked toward him and said, "It's okay, Tim. We can talk this out." Well, he wasn't wrong anyway. I am a pretty girl. I'll take care of it from here. Then she gestured to him to go wait in the car and leave us three alone. She told us her name was Chelsea, and that the scary-looking guy was her younger brother. She gave us a chance to explain what happened. Then she told us what was shown on the surveillance cameras. In the end, we realized what actually happened. While we'd been talking to Darcy at the counter, Chelsea and her brother must have come in and sat at the table Darcy had been at. Then they quickly changed their minds and switched tables, but Chelsea left her phone there by mistake. Once this Chelsea girl realized it was all a misunderstanding, she kept on twirling her hair around her finger, and I'm sure I saw her wink at me. Was she flirting with us? I mean, she was kinda cute, but she's surely older than us, like around 30-ish. Then she said, "So how about we go hang out sometime? As I see it, you owe me a coffee at least." Was she being serious? I couldn't go on a date with her. I don't feel comfortable dating someone that much older than me. And what about Darcy? She's all I had in mind right now. I mean, I could always go and tell my brother that you guys really stole my phone, she smirked. Was she joking or being serious? I didn't know, and I wasn't going to chance it. So I spluttered out, "Sure, coffee will be good." We exchanged phone numbers with her. Later, she texted us to set up the times and places. I didn't want to meet her, so on the day of the date, I phoned Jake up and feigned being sick and told him he'd have to go alone. To my surprise, he didn't seem to mind. Instead, he sounded excited about it. Then, after the date, he came straight to my dorm, saying he wanted to check up on me, but I knew it's just an excuse. All he did was go on and on with me about how much fun Chelsea was, and that she was rich and stuff, so it wasn't just a simple coffee date. But she took him to this fancy restaurant too. I didn't expect Jake would be like that. I'm glad he enjoyed it though. Anything so I wouldn't have to go on a date with her. This went on for a while, and soon they seemed pretty serious. Whenever Jake spoke about her, he went all gooey eyes. So my boy was in love. She clearly cared about him too, and made it so he didn't have to work at the restaurant anymore. I was happy for Jake. I truly was. And also relieved I didn't have to date Chelsea. But I also felt down about it all. He was in love while my dream girl was out there somewhere, and I didn't know how to find her. And that's when my luck changed. I was at work carrying the drinks over to a table when, to my surprise, I saw that Darcy was sitting there. I must have been gawping at her as she laughed and said, "Hey, the Coke's mine." Blushing, I passed her the Coke, then said, "I don't know if you remember, but we met a few weeks ago in the coffee shop around the corner." "Sure," she smiled. "It's nice to meet you again, coffee boy." She was so cute and sweet. There's no way I could let her slip through my fingers again. So I checked to make sure my boss wasn't looking. Then I asked Darcy for her number. She wrote it on a napkin and passed it to me on her way out. I was so excited I fist-pumped the air. Through our messages, I discovered she just started an internship around the corner, and she really wanted to impress them, so they'd offer her an official job. I was happy as this meant I would get to see her loads. Every time she came into the restaurant, I tried my best to make a move with her without letting my boss notice. One time, I gave her a free dessert, then said, "Something sweet for the sweetest girl I know." Cheesy, I know, but girls love that kind of stuff. There were sparks flying everywhere. I knew she felt it too. I just needed to find the courage to ask her out. Then one day, suddenly Chelsea texted me, asking why I never came to see her. I thought this was odd, so I replied that I thought her and Jake were kind of official now. To my surprise, she replied, "Come on, you still haven't properly made it up to me after stealing my phone. You know the cops wouldn't be too happy to hear that either, right? Or I could just tell my brother." I didn't want to get in trouble with either her giant of a brother or the cops, so yeah, I agreed to go on a date with her. We met at the same coffee shop where this whole phone drama started, as she said it was close to her work. This time, she introduced herself as the marketing manager of some big company. Wow, okay, that's impressive for her age. She's beautiful and successful. Maybe I really have been a bit rude to this respectable woman, so I decided to sit back and hear her out. But the next minute, she was like, "Austin, I've loved you since first sight." She grabbed my hand. "Jake's a sweet guy, but he's not you." What? She didn't even know me. She was crazy. And how could she do this to Jake? Then suddenly a group of people walked into the cafe. She said they were her employees and waved them over. Then told them, "Everyone, this is my boyfriend Austin." I glared at her, but I had no choice but to awkwardly greet everyone just to get it over with as quick as possible. But then I saw a familiar face in the crowd. No way.
Sometimes in life, we have a chance encounter with someone who ends up changing our life. This is exactly what happened to me, and it was totally unexpected. You see, I was pretty lonely at the time. I'm Amelia, by the way, and I'm 20 years old. I was living all on my own in a tiny house in Portland. It was my mom's house, but she sadly passed away from cancer 2 years ago. I'm not going to say that life was easy for me, because it wasn't. All I wanted was to become a comic book artist. I love art so much, but the only way I could make this dream a reality was to make money. Ever since graduating from high school, I'd been working as a waitress to make ends meet, and also to save up enough cash to enroll in art college. Honestly, this job got me through the hardest time in my life. The days, weeks, and months after my mom passed away were so painful, and the restaurant kept me busy, so I barely had time to sit with all my feelings. Moreover, little did I know how much this waitressing job would change my life forever. It all started with an incident in the restaurant. I'll never forget that day. I was carrying a tray of food when I accidentally spilled some water onto the shoes of some fancy girl. Oh my god, she went crazy. She started screaming at me, and even though I frantically apologized right away, she still asked to speak to my manager. I leapt down and tried to clean the water off her shoes with a cloth, and that's when I heard a voice.
"Hey, stop! What do you think you're doing?"
I looked up and saw the boy she was with staring at me. He looked disgusted at me, and then said to the girl,
"Babe, let's bounce before that waitress ruins your shoes even more with her filthy hands. Come on, let's hit the mall. I'll buy you a new pair of shoes."
Clearly, he was her boyfriend, and as soon as he mentioned new shoes, her eyes sparkled with joy as she said, "Yay, babe! I want a new bag too, though. Could you?"
And her boyfriend just laughed and said, "Anything you want, my princess."
They got up to leave and smirked at me as they walked away. I couldn't believe how rude they were, especially the boy. I felt so angry. I wished I could slap him right across that cocky face. But of course, I didn't. There was no way I could risk losing my job. But I knew that if I ever saw his face again, I'd definitely give him a piece of my mind. And, well, believe it or not, I did indeed see him again. The world works in mysterious ways, and I guess we were destined to meet again. A few weeks after that, one evening, I was heading home and passed by the park to feed the stray cats as usual. While I was playing with them, I noticed some guy heading towards me. Suddenly, he grabbed my arms and pulled me towards him. I started shouting at him and trying to push him away, but he was too strong. Then, out of nowhere, someone said, "What's going on? I'm trying to sleep over here. Keep it down." A drunk, dirty-looking homeless guy walked towards us, and for a second I was terrified. But then I realized he was helping me. He started shouting at the guy holding on to me, saying, "Hey you! Are you deaf or something? Let her go and keep silent." The jerk was getting heated, and the next moment, he punched that homeless guy in the face, and then they started fighting. Then I freaked out and didn't know what to do. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and played a recording of a police siren. I live alone, so I know all the tricks. Well, that did it. The jerk who'd grabbed me suddenly jumped up and sprinted out of the park. The homeless guy who'd helped me was still lying on the ground, so I helped him up. He was black and blue, and there were even some scratches on his face. And as I got closer to him, I realized he looked familiar. OMG! Wasn't he the rude guy from the restaurant? What was he doing looking all dirty like a homeless guy? He had his eyes closed, so I patted his face and said, "Hey, wake up! What are you doing out here?" He opened his eyes and asked, "Do I know you?" He stared at me for a while, then eyeing my uniform and smiled. "Oh, the little waitress. Guess what? I'm poorer than you now." Then he passed out. I was so annoyed that I'd bumped into him again. I was about to leave him lying there, but then I realized he'd saved me, and I could hardly leave him there with all his injuries. So, yeah, in the end, I decided to take him back to my place to get my first aid kit. I cleaned up his scratches, and then let him crash on my sofa. The next morning, he was super surprised when he woke up. I told him what had happened and that he'd saved my life, so I saved his. Then I said he should probably head home now, but he just stared at me. And that's when he told me his story. He really was homeless. His parents had kicked him out because they'd found out he wasn't their biological son. What on earth? How could any parent do that? It's not like he has tricked them, but it was due to some mix-up at birth. So, wasn't he also a victim? I felt sorry for him, but still, it was none of my business. I had to get to work, so I asked him to leave, but he begged me to let him stay. I just looked at him in shock and said, how about you go to your rich girlfriend's place instead? I really need to get going now. But he didn't budge. He said, "Oh, don't even mention that gold digger. She only cared about me when I was the only son of a millionaire. Now that I've got nothing, not a cent, she broke up with me." Wow. Shocker. But, well, it's not like I couldn't tell that she has a lousy personality right from the get-go. So I said, "Well, what about your friends? Can't you crash with them?" But he said no. It started to frustrate me. So I said, "You can't stay here. I don't even know a thing about you." Then he splurted out, "Hi, I'm Jude. I'm 22 years old, I've got all my fingers and toes, and my criminal record is clean. There you go. Now you know me." And he topped it off with a grin, as if that could win me over. He then went on to say that he'd pay rent, and that when he found a job and stuff, he'd leave. I hesitated. I mean, I couldn't live with a strange guy. But then I thought about that extra money I'd get if he helped with rent. I could really use that money for my college fees. He could see I wasn't sure, so he said, "Come on, please. I mean, I did save your life last night." "But there's only one bedroom," I said. "Don't worry, I'll sleep here." He pointed at the sofa. I thought for a while, then nodded my head and agreed. "And only for 1 month, okay?" Then I made him shower and change his clothes, since he was so gross and dirty. But he told me he didn't have anything to change to. "I was kicked out, remember?" And he even had the cheek to ask me for some money to buy new clothes. No chance. I told him he could wear my clothes, since some of them were quite big. At first, he refused. He said there was no way he was wearing women's clothes. So I said he either wore them or kept his dirty clothes and left my house. Ha! Of course he had no choice. and seeing him in my floral pants was hilarious. A few days later, though, he still hadn't found a job. Every night I'd come home to find him lying on the sofa in my oversized pajamas. He was so messy and lazy, and after a week, I couldn't bear it. I nagged him. "You have to find a job, or how do you expect to pay me rent? And the least you can do is clean up around here. I'm not your maid." He said he'd been looking for an office job, but it was hard as he had no knowledge and experience. This annoyed me, so I suggested he apply for a delivery man position. He looked at me in horror and said, "What do you think I am?" "Oh, hello, you're a homeless boy with nothing. What else do you want?" I thought. Then I said he could come work with me in the restaurant, but he refused, saying that his friends went there all the time and they'd laugh at him. I was speechless. I said, "Suit yourself, but after 1 month, you're out of here." A few hours later, he knocked on my bedroom door and said he'd take the restaurant job, but he needed clothes. Finally, I'm glad that this boy has come to his senses. "That's great. You can start from tomorrow. I'll call the manager. And I know the exact place where you could get all the stylish clothes for free. Let's go." At first, he was so excited, but when he realized that I was taking him to a clothing donation center, his face changed. He looked disgusted and said, "No way." I smirked and said, "It's up to you. You either pick something to wear from this place, or you can wear my clothes. I've got a floral dress that would really bring out the color of your eyes." He looked so sulky as he reluctantly went through the rack of used clothes. It was so funny. But everything was only about to start. You won't believe what happened next. Stay tuned for part 2 to see how things went between Jude and I.
Hey, Daisy here. I'm just your normal 19-year-old college girl living away from home for the first time. And can't deny that it could get lonely sometimes. And I felt homesick a lot. But it's okay though, as I have Lucas, my loving boyfriend. Okay, yeah, his family is well off, so he always treats me to nice places and buys me nice gifts. A few months ago, he told me to move in with him in his family's mansion. And I've agreed. But don't get me wrong, I'm not a gold digger at all. I just had no other choice. It all started one night when thieves broke into my apartment while I was asleep. It was terrifying. I knew they were ransacking my living room and stealing my TV and laptop, but I'd rather stay put to protect myself. After that, I didn't want to be home alone at all anymore. Lucas, too, was worried for me, so one evening he told me, "Daisy, I think you should come live with me, at least until you find a roommate." Wow. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess it made sense. I felt a bit awkward about it, though, as I've only been to his house, or should I say his parents' mansion, a few times. And although there was plenty of space, and his parents adored me, but I didn't want to feel like I was intruding. Sensing my apprehension, he continued, "I've explained the situation to my parents, and they're cool with it." I smiled at him and replied, "Well, okay then, but it will just be temporary." Before I moved in with Lucas and his family, I felt very anxious. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to adapt to their lifestyle, and I didn't want to upset his parents. I worried a lot, but not once did I think my trouble would be with the maid. Yep, you heard me right. On my first day at the mansion, a cheerful woman immediately ran towards me and greeted me. Mrs. Harris introduced her to me. "This is our maid, Sarah. She's been with us for years, so if you have any problem, just ask her. We're all family here. Make yourself comfortable." Then Sarah quickly grabbed my suitcase and smiled at me. "Miss, let me help you with that. I'll show you to the room." It was so strange having someone else do stuff for me like this. I could just smile back and follow her upstairs. That made me feel so welcomed here, and how nice this maid was. Maybe we could be friends. But suddenly, a thump cuts off my thoughts. It was Sarah. She'd thrown my suitcase to the floor, then said, "What on earth do you have in there? Carry it yourself. Your room is down the hallway to the left." And she walked off. What was that? Did I do something wrong? I quickly picked up my stuff in confusion. I didn't want to make an enemy of anyone here, especially not on my first day. So after I unpacked my stuff, I went down to the kitchen to help her prepare dinner. She was still so grumpy at me and told me to just get lost as I'd only be in her way. I remained persistent, as I really wanted to resolve whatever her misunderstandings about me were. Eventually, she gave in and said, "Fine, you want to help? Go dice up all of those onions." "Yes, sure, but all of these?" I asked her while staring at a basket full of onions. "Are you going to help me or not?" she said sharply. I replied, Okay, don't worry, I'll do it." I tried starting up a convo with her, but she just rolled her eyes at me. Meanwhile, the onions were giving me hell. My eyes were burning and tears were streaming out. Ouch! When I finally finished, she stared at my swollen eyes and said, "If you're that upset about living here, you could just leave." "It's the onions," I told her. She smirked as she took them off me, then walked straight to the trash and threw them away, saying, "You took too long. I didn't need it anymore." What? My face dropped, but I was far too exhausted to argue with her anyway. That's when Lucas and his parents came down for dinner. Sarah quickly set up the tables, then called me over with a bright smile as she pulled out a chair for me. "Miss Campbell, please take a seat. Dinner is ready." Was she for real? I couldn't keep up with her constant change in personality. After dinner, I approached Sarah while she was doing the dishes. "Look, I'm sorry, but did I do something to upset you?" "Yes, you sure did. You waltz around like you own the place, but you're nothing more than a parasite. And I won't let you worm your way into my home." Before I had time to process her words, she grabbed an expensive-looking marble plate and smirked at me as she dropped it onto the ground. Then, with a piece of broken plate, she quickly slit her hand and yelled out loud, "Miss, I'm so sorry for vexing you, but you shouldn't have broken this. It's Mr. Harris's favorite plate." Hearing the crashing sound, everyone quickly gathered in the kitchen and stared at me for answers. I immediately explained, "No, it's not like that." But Mrs. Harris said, "It's okay. Let's help Sarah first." Then she led her off to get the first aid kit. I grabbed Lucas's arm. "Babe, I really didn't do that." He reassured me with a smile. "Daisy, don't worry about it." "You don't understand. Sarah did it on purpose and blamed me." He laughed as if he'd just heard something ridiculous, then said, "No way. I bet it was just some sort of misunderstanding. Sarah is really nice. Don't worry, you two will get close in no time. Now let me clean up this mess. You go and relax." I felt frustrated and fed up, but I reluctantly went back to my room. This girl was definitely onto me. But for what reason? Over the following weeks, her vendetta against me continued. She washed my white clothes with colored ones, then intentionally threw away my stuff and made out she mistook it for trash while cleaning my room. She put extra hot chili flakes in my food, then rushed over with a glass of water when I started to choke, and so on. Worse still, Lucas and his parents wouldn't hear a bad word said against her. They were completely oblivious to how crazy she was. I didn't understand why she hated me so much. Was she jealous of me or something? All right then. If she wanted to play with me, then game on. So I decided to spy on her to catch her red-handed and show everyone her true self. My chance to expose her finally arrived. I was passing her room and I saw her holding a watch. I recognized it. It was Mr. Harris's. She looked shifty as she placed it into her drawer and hid it underneath some of her clothes. Aha! Got her. I quickly ran to the garden to find Mrs. Harris and managed to persuade her to come with me to Sarah's room. Sarah stood by looking all innocent as Mrs. Harris checked her drawer, but the watch wasn't there, and instead we found it still intact on the vanity in the master bedroom. Huh? At that moment, Sarah suddenly bawled out, "Ma'am, I would never steal from you. You know that. I've gone out of my way to please Miss Campbell here, but she's intent on making my life a misery." Oh my God. Those crocodile tears. Did she have no shame? I tried explaining myself to Mrs. Harris, but she held up her hand and told me she didn't want to hear it. I wanted to make amends, so the next morning, I prepared Mrs. Harris's favorite smoothie and breakfast for her. I set it up nicely on the dining table, then went upstairs to get her, smirking at Sarah as she passed by. Mrs. Harris seemed happy with the gesture, but just an hour later, she said she didn't feel well. She was clutching her stomach as she glared at me and blamed me for poisoning her food. What? How frustrating. And Lucas wasn't even home for me to talk to. So I went to the kitchen to check the expiration date of everything I'd used. But I swear it was all fresh. I even went through the trash to check the used milk carton. That's when I saw some sesame seeds in there. That's odd, as I knew Mrs. Harris was allergic to them, so we never had them in the house. It had to be Sarah. She must have poisoned the breakfast with them when I was out of the room. Later that day, Mrs. Harris was feeling better, so I went to see her and told her that I was leaving, on one condition. Then I persuaded her to come into my room and hide in my closet. By this point, I think she was willing to do anything just to get me out of her house. Then I called Sarah over to help me pack up my stuff. She stepped into my room with a cocky smile and knocked over the box of my stuff, then said, "I was always going to win." I replied, "Fine, you win. But before I leave, I want to ask you something. You put sesame seeds in the breakfast I made for Mrs. Harris, didn't you?" Sarah looked around to check no one else was about before she grinned at me and said, "Yes, it was me, all me. While you were sucking up to Mrs. Harris, I ground some up and mixed them into the disgusting smoothie you made. Oh, I also pretended to steal the watch because I knew you were spying on me. Geez, you made it so easy." "But why?" I asked. "But why?" She imitated my voice. "Because this is my family. I've lived here for years. You can't just show up all pretty and carefree and expect to have everything and push me out of my own home. I never wanted to push you out. All I wanted was to be your friend." As if. This is my gold mine, not yours. Sooner or later, all of this will be mine, and God knows I deserve it. I've put up with this annoying family and a poor salary for years. Mr. Harris always dreamed of having a daughter, but no, he's stuck with that dumb son of his. It's only a matter of time until he realizes I can be the daughter he longed for. Or, now that you won't be around, it'll be easy for me to trap Lucas by having his baby. Either way, the winner is always me. Suddenly, the wardrobe doors burst open, and out emerged Mrs. Harris looking furious. She pulled Sarah's hair and dragged her out of the room. Wow, who knew the mild-mannered Mrs. Harris could be so kick-ass? I guess everyone has a hidden side. Anyway, this proved my innocence, and Sarah was kicked out right on the spot. Then Mrs. Harris apologized to me and insisted that I should keep staying with them. I thanked her for the offer, but politely declined. As I felt ready to leave and move in with my friend, I was just relieved that she'd learned the truth and that Sarah had gone once and for all. So, Lucas and I are still together and are very happy. Yes, it was annoying he didn't believe me at first, but he's such a sweet and trusting guy that he'd never expect someone could be capable of such horrible things. But hey, that's just one of the many reasons why I love him. As for his parents, well, I still visit them sometimes. I even cook for them now and then, but thankfully, there have been no more sesame seed incidents, and there's no more crazy maid to contend with. Phew!
Hey, it's Vanessa, back with the final part of my story. So, my first love Julian moved to Germany, and due to my insecurities, we lost touch. Then, years later, I saw him at my college campus, measuring my favorite tree to be chopped down. He didn't recognize me, but thanks to him, the tree was saved. He said to me,
"This tree must mean a lot to you, or else you wouldn't have fought so hard to save it. I had a tree like this once," he sighed. "Please continue to protect it."
I felt a pain in my heart. I knew he meant our tree back home. This was all so overwhelming. There I was looking at my first love, but he was oblivious to who I was. And I couldn't tell him because I was terrified that doing so would mean I'd lose him all over again. After that, I didn't see him around campus anymore. Was he living here now? Was he in another city? There were so many questions I wanted to ask him. Then my mom called and told me to come home for the weekend. I arrived there to find her setting out food in the kitchen. On seeing me, she said, "Oh, honey, I have a surprise for you. Julian and his family are back in town, and they're coming over for lunch." What? Oh, no. Why hadn't she told me sooner? I started to panic. What was I going to do now? I rushed to my room and tried to find anything I could use to cover my face. Finally, I found one thing. I heard my mom opening the door for Julian and his family. Then my mom cheerfully shouted, "Vanessa, where are you, sweetie? Come down. Julian is here, and oh my, he's so handsome. But my parents' smile soon disappeared as soon as they saw me coming down the stairs. They literally stood there with their mouths wide open. My mother stuttered, Vanessa, what in God's name are you wearing? Yeah, so the only thing I could find to cover my face was a face mask. Worse still, it had a smiling dog face on it. I know I look ridiculous, but at least my lupus was covered. Thinking fast, I muttered, I have a cold and I don't want anyone to catch it. Then I turned and saw Julian and my heart fluttered. He gave me a confused look. He clearly didn't know how to take my accessory. This was so awkward. The last memory he had of me was that I didn't want to video call with him anymore. And that was 5 years ago. Ugh, this sucked. I nodded at him and he nodded back. I caught him looking at me, no doubt because I was wearing that dumb mask. But we didn't actually speak to each other. Luckily, our parents were carrying the conversation. But then, my mom suggested that we should all go out for dinner tomorrow night. Mom, not again! Why didn't she realize that I needed to be pre-warned about these things? Then again, it was so easy for her as she had perfect looking skin. Luckily, Julian's family were busy tomorrow. Phew! But they suggested having dinner the day after that. Ugh! Dinner was unavoidable, so I had to figure out a way of disguising my face. So, the evening of the dinner, I ran downstairs and my mom glared at me. Vanessa, what on earth are you wearing? You look like Elton John. So yeah, I was wearing these huge fashion sunglasses. They were the only ones I could find online that I knew would arrive in time. I replied, this is the new trend now. You're just too old to understand. At the restaurant, Julian and his family gave me the weirdest looks, but I acted like everything was normal and mentioned how good the food was. To be honest, I felt so awkward and just hoped this meal would be over soon. It all got a bit too much, so I went outside to get some fresh air. That's when Julian appeared. At first, he just stood there next to me in silence. It got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore, so I said, since when did you come back here? He replied,
Since 1 month.
Feeling annoyed, I replied, why didn't you call me?
Ness, you're the one who didn't want to be friends anymore.
Oh no, you got it all wrong. I had some problems, girl problems. I couldn't tell you.
You know, I was really lonely in Germany. You were the only friend I had.
His voice sagged. I replied, I know, it was stupid of me. I'm sorry, but you're back now. Can we be friends again? He looked at me for a bit, then smiled and said,
Seriously, how can I be mad at you now? I mean, look at you.
And then we hugged. I finally had my best friend back, but this wasn't enough for me. Seeing him again made me realize I still loved him even after all these years. My face was the problem. I was convinced that on seeing the real me, he'd run for the hills. After that, Julian and I texted each other loads, but then he asked me out on a date. At first, I was super excited, but then the reality of this dawned on me. I put on my prettiest dress, but as I stood in front of the mirror, all I saw were my bright red cheeks. Maybe I should just risk it. Maybe he would understand and still love me? I mean, it was inner beauty that counted, right? But no, I couldn't do it. So I messaged him back saying that I couldn't go out with him, but he was persistent. In the end, I ran out of excuses, so eventually I had to agree. Okay, so now what? I couldn't keep on wearing face masks and sunglasses. Then I had an idea. What about makeup? I knew it would make my skin worse, but this was an emergency. I put some makeup on, but the rashes were still visible, so I put more and more and more and I resembled Billy the Puppet from the Saw movies. Then there was a knock at the door. Oh no, he was here already! Oh well, I hope he likes horror movies. On seeing me, Julian looked kinda shocked, but he tried to act normal. The restaurant we went to was so nice, but every time he looked at me, he had to try his hardest not to laugh, which in turn made me want to laugh too. Awkward. Afterward, we went for a walk through the park when it suddenly began to rain. So we hurried over to our favorite big tree to take cover. Julian found the carving on the tree and said,
Do you remember this? That day I promised you I'd come back for you.
Then he turned to me, pulled me towards him. His face came closer and oh my god, was he going to kiss me? But then he stopped and said,
Oh, Ness, your makeup is floating away. I have a tissue. Let me clean your face.
Wait, what? Oh no, not now. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, so I hid my face from Julian and said, Don't look at me. Can you please go? Confused, he asked,
What? You're acting really weird. What's wrong?
Then he turned to look at my face. I pushed him away and said, No, I'm fine. I'm just having a girl problem moment. But Julian kept insisting, so I freaked out and ran into the rain. He ran behind me yelling,
Vanessa, stop!
I kept running, but then I tripped and my face fell into a muddy puddle. Oh, great! My whole face was covered with mud and my knee was bleeding, so I couldn't stand up. Julian had to help me hobble to the nearest drugstore to buy some bandages and some betadine to clean the wound for me. I sat on a bench feeling like a wounded puppy when he took out a tissue and started wiping the mud from my face. At first, I stopped him, but then he gave me a really serious look, so I let him clean my face. Well, that was it. Julian would finally see my face and he would definitely not want to date me anymore. While cleaning my face, he looked surprised. Then he said,
Wait a minute, you're going to college in Florida, right? Didn't I meet you like a few weeks ago on the campus? Why didn't you tell me it was you?
Because I didn't want you to see me like this. I turned my head away. He looked confused, so he asked,
Like what exactly? Ness, you're acting so weird.
What did he mean? Was he trying to make fun of me? So I shouted in anger, It's my face! Don't act like you don't see it. I was afraid that if you saw my face, you wouldn't want to be with me anymore. Julian shook his head and said,
No, Ness, why would I ever do that? To me, you will always be beautiful. Beauty isn't only about having a pretty face. It's about having a pretty mind, a pretty heart, and a pretty soul.
And then he kissed me on the forehead. Oh gosh, I never imagined that it would turn out like this. Julian was indeed the sweetest person ever, and I should have never have doubted him. Well, Julian and I became an official couple. Loving him makes me so happy. He makes me believe in myself and reminds me that regardless of my lupus, I'm still beautiful. And we will soon get married in a few months. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with him, happily ever after. So, as you can see, in the end, Julian was my first and my last love, which means my fairy tale dreams did come true. But let me tell you this, it's not important if you marry your first love or not. It's important that you marry someone who makes you happy and someone who accepts you for who you are. So, when you find someone like that, then hold on to them, whether this is your first or your 21st love.
In every high school boy's story, there's always a drop-dead gorgeous girl who makes him do stupid things to try to win the girl over, right? Well, my story is pretty much along those lines, except I was competing with a dog. Yeah, you heard me. Here we go. So my name's Liam, and I'm 17. And Suzanne is the girl I was chasing. I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was during a football match at school, and she was one of the cheerleaders. Her bouncy blonde locks and her bright blue eyes drove me crazy. And I couldn't take my eyes off her. In other words, I was smitten. So that's when I started my pickup plan. I paid my friend $10 to find out her address and her favorite food. Stalk her much? Well, this was only the beginning. Once I had her address, I walked up to her house holding a strawberry cheesecake with a love letter attached to it. I peeked over the fence and was about to put the cake on the doorstep, ring the doorbell, and run away. But as I was walking towards the door, a dog appeared and jumped towards me. I freaked out and tried to run away, but instead I face-planted in the ground and, of course, the cake landed right next to me and the letter flew away. What a disaster! Plus, the damn dog kept biting at my pants. Meanwhile, I was screaming like a little kid. And guess who appeared at that moment? None other than Suzanne. Noticing the cake and the letter with her name on it, she smiled down at me, helped me up, and said she had a first aid kit inside. She said her dog Loki just got excited when he saw new people. And then she kept apologizing, but I told her it was okay. And to be honest, I'd fall down like that every day if it meant I got to be helped up by Suzanne. After that, we started texting, although most of the time she was sending me photos of Loki. Finally, after a few months of texts, I plucked up the courage to ask her out on a proper date, and it was amazing. After dropping her off at her front door, I decided that was the moment to confess my feelings and ask her to be my girlfriend. I was shaking so much that I almost forgot to breathe. But luckily, she told me she liked me too. Then suddenly she grabbed me and planted a big kiss on my cheek. And so I held her and decided to go in for a proper kiss on the lips. But out of nowhere, Loki appeared and leapt on me and I fell flat on my face. Not again! And this time I was furious. I sat up and I was about to go crazy. But then I noticed Suzanne was laughing. "Loki seems to like you," she joked. "He's driving me insane," but seeing how happy she was made my anger all gone. I was about to stand up and go in for a kiss again, but Loki kept pulling Suzanne inside. She had no choice but to follow him. So I was left there all alone. Man, what was that dog's problem? After that night, I refused to go to Suzanne's house when we met up. I even told her I thought her dog hated me, and she thought that was hilarious. She then said he was just protective, and then she shared the story of why they adopted him. So when I was 8, my best friend lived next door. His name was Andrew, and Loki was his pet. The three of us were so close, but one day Andrew's parents got divorced, and Andrew moved to Canada with his dad. So he left Loki with me. It's been 9 years since we saw each other. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe Loki hated me because he thought Suzanne was Andrew's girlfriend. No way! He was just a dog, right? And the trouble was never ending. Prom night arrived, and Suzanne was so excited. I made sure I got to her house early and waited her for a while she did her hair and stuff. I told her I'd wait outside, but she insisted I come in. I was dreading seeing Loki, but of course there he was, waiting for me by the couch with a smirk on his face. I mean, come on, since when do dogs smirk? I sat there nervously watching him, but after Suzanne had gone back upstairs, he came over to me with a photo in his mouth. It was Suzanne sitting next to a boy, and Loki was there too. Obviously, it was Andrew in the photo, and they looked so happy together. Why was Loki showing me this? I looked Loki straight in the eyes and said, "Listen up, Loki. Andrew and Suzanne aren't together. Suzanne is my girlfriend, so just leave us alone, okay?" Loki just kept staring at me, then he left. It was clear I'd lost the plot. There I was threatening a dog. After a while, Suzanne came downstairs, and we were about to leave. But I couldn't find my shoes anywhere. After 30 minutes of looking, we still couldn't find them, and by then Suzanne was pretty upset with me. She ran upstairs and locked herself in her room. I didn't know what to do, so I got up to leave barefoot. When I got outside, I noticed Loki smirking again, but I wasn't in the mood to care about him now. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and it was Loki with my shoes in his mouth. He dropped them at my feet and then ran off. I couldn't believe it. That stupid dog stole my shoes and ruined our night. I spent the next week texting Suzanne trying to apologize, and eventually she forgave me. But I still hate Loki so much. He was seriously making my life a living nightmare. During the summer, Suzanne was going to Chicago with her parents to visit her aunt, so she asked me to look after Loki for 2 weeks. What? You've got to be kidding me. I had no choice but to agree. If I said no, I'd risk losing Suzanne. So when I went to pick him up, I saw him standing there smirking at me again. It looked like he was saying, "Oh, hey, Liam, are you ready for 2 weeks of hell with me?" The worst part was all the instructions Suzanne had for me about how to take care of her precious Loki. Feed him with organic dog food 3 times a day in his special bowl. Then make sure he gets 2 walks a day, no less than 5 miles each time. And every night at 6 p.m. he needs his bath with his doggy bubble bath. He likes to be massaged behind the ears. And please read him a bedtime story to ensure he has sweet dreams. This had to be some kind of joke. How would I remember all of that? And as expected from day one, it was a total disaster. It was summer vacation. So I wasn't going to bed early. In fact, I was playing video games with my friends all night. So I never managed to wake up at 6 a.m. to feed him. And surely he wouldn't die if he skipped a meal, right? But well, he didn't give me much choice. He leapt onto my bed at 6:30 a.m., licking my face and demanding food. Another time I was going to my friend's house, so obviously I couldn't take him with me. So before leaving, I said, "Hey, Loki, be a good boy, I'll be back soon." Then I smirked and locked the door. Loki started barking, so I knew he was angry. Well, it served him right. However, when I got home that night, I discovered he'd peed all over my clothes and messed up my entire room. He'd clearly done this to get revenge, and I was fuming. I started yelling at him as I was cleaning up the mess. And that's when I realized that I'd have to take him everywhere with me. Even though he was super annoying, I started to understand why Suzanne loved him. He was smart, affectionate, and I guess it's kind of nice to have company. When I was watching movies alone, he would come over and lay in my lap. When I played video games, I could ask him to bring me snacks. And once I went to the toilet and realized the loo roll was finished, and I shouted, "Loki, can you please get me some loo roll?" And he actually brought me one. A few days later, we were out walking in the park, and I saw some boys playing basketball. I was desperate to join them, so I told Loki to wait for me. But after the match, he was nowhere to be seen. I freaked out and frantically searched the whole park, but it was hopeless. Suzanne would never forgive me if I lost her precious Loki. So the next day I put up some flyers hoping someone had found him. Well, luckily for me, someone called me and said they had found him. I immediately went to get him and waited outside the address they'd given me, which was in a kind of dodgy part of town. While I was waiting, 2 men dressed in black clothes approached me. They looked suspicious, so I tried to step out of the way, but one of them grabbed my arm and said, "Give us your money, otherwise you might get hurt." I started struggling and trying to get away. But this made them even angrier. I freaked out when suddenly I heard a familiar barking. Loki! He was rushing towards us and started biting at the robbers' clothes, pulling them away from me. I was so relieved, and after a while, the robbers ran off, scared half to death. I gave Loki the biggest hug, and he was wagging his tail in delight. Then a woman with a dog came towards us. Turns out she was the person who had called me. She'd been walking her dog Penny in the park when Loki had started following them and wouldn't leave Penny alone. He'd been smitten with her, so Penny's owner didn't know what to do and took Loki home. Eventually she saw the posters, and that's when she'd contacted me. So Loki was as bad as me, chasing a pretty girl. How funny. When we got home, I thanked Loki again for saving me. Then I said, "You know Andrew doesn't live here anymore, right? He's in Canada, which is far away. But listen, I love Suzanne so much, and I know you do too. So we'll take care of her together, okay?" He kept staring at me like he was waiting for something more. So then I said, "Oh, right. Yeah. If you agree, I promise I'll take you to Penny's house to visit her. Deal?" I reached out my hand to shake his, and he legit put his paw in my hand. Okay, done deal. A few days later, Suzanne got back and picked up Loki. And when I told Suzanne everything that had happened, she burst out laughing. After that, our relationship got even better, and we started hanging out with Loki more. Although whenever I wanted to kiss her, I always said to Loki, "Hey bro, look away." And he never once tried to interfere again. Loki and I are on good terms now, as he's in love with Penny as I am with Suzanne. It's true what they say, boys go wild for pretty girls.
Hi, my name is Happiness. You're impressed with my name, right? My dad gave me that name. And yeah, as you can guess, he put a lot of hopes and dreams in me. I'm now 18 years old, and tomorrow I will fly to Massachusetts to start my college. My parents are preparing a farewell party for me downstairs. I have never left my hometown and been away from my family, so this is such an occasion. As I'm packing my belongings for college, a flood of memories come to mind. You see, when I was a kid, my family was dirt poor. We lived in an old, dilapidated house on the outskirts of Selma in Alabama. I remember we would buy a chicken at the beginning of the month, and my parents would make it last the whole month. I didn't realize we were poor, though. In fact, at that point, I was just a happy, carefree little girl, but that wouldn't last. My mom worked as a cleaner for a rich family, but they treated her terribly, and she barely earned enough money to even take the bus there. My dad was a lorry driver, and so he was away a lot, delivering goods to other states. Every weekend when he came home, I'd stand out on the porch as soon as I saw his big truck driving up the dusty road. I'd run out there and jump up and down. The best part was that he always brought me a little present, like a piece of candy that he'd saved for me, or a small toy. They weren't valuable gifts, but they meant the world to me. One time he came home, and I ran up to him and said, "Daddy, yesterday Jeannie's dad brought her a chocolate egg back from his trip. It even had a toy inside. I want one too." My dad looked confused. Then he said he'd heard of them, and they were called Kinder Eggs. And then, with loving eyes and a smile, he promised he'd find me one, no matter how hard it would be, even if it was the last thing he did. The next weekend, I raced out to the street and could barely contain my excitement as I waited for him to come home. I waited and waited, but still he didn't arrive. I started to get worried, so I asked my mom where he was. She said, "Oh, sweetie, he's on his way. Why don't you go to sleep, and as soon as you wake up, he'll be here." There was no way I could sleep. All I could think about was getting a chocolate egg with a toy inside. I'd almost dozed off when I heard his voice. I ran downstairs and jumped into his arms, hugging him. "I missed you, Daddy," I told him, and he laughed and said, "I missed you too, sweetie pie." Then I said, where is it? Did you get me a chocolate egg?" I eagerly asked. Then his face dropped. He said, "Sorry, baby. I was working late, so I didn't have time to buy one, but I promise I'll bring you 2 next time to make up for it, okay?" But this wasn't okay. I was so disappointed. I pushed him away from me and burst into tears, saying, You promised me! I'd never cried like that before over something so small, but at the time it felt like such a big deal, and my dad looked confused to see me so upset. At that moment, my mom came through and saw me. She immediately understood everything, then started to comfort my dad. "Come on, honey, take a rest. You've worked yourself too hard recently. Come eat. You're so skinny these days." This just made me more annoyed. I was the one who needed comforting, not my dad. So I shouted at my mom, "Mommy, Daddy didn't keep his promise." But my mom just ignored me, and so I stormed back up the stairs, crying all the way. After I'd calmed down, my mom came to my room and said, "Happiness, your dad works so hard, and you should just be happy that he's home safely. I know he didn't bring you what you wanted, but he will next time, okay? In the meantime, I'll make your favorite cupcakes every day." "Every day? Wow, okay," I said to her. And she really did. She made me cupcakes every day, and I was so happy. After a few days, I said to her, "Mommy, I like you more than Daddy. I don't even love him anymore because he broke his promise." My mom just looked at me and said, "Oh, Happiness, you don't know what you're saying. One day when you grow up, you'll understand that everything your dad does is for you. He loves you so much." The next weekend rolled around, and as usual, I ran outside to wait for my dad. Just like the week before, the sun set and still he was nowhere to be seen. I was about to start crying when I noticed a man running towards our front door. My mom appeared and he said something, and suddenly my mom started panicking. She called out to me and said we had to go to Grandpa's place immediately. I had no idea what was happening, but for the next month, my grandpa took care of me because my parents didn't come home. I missed them so much, and whenever I asked when they were coming to get me, my grandpa just said, "Happiness, they're busy working. Don't you worry. Just stay here and enjoy your time with me." Eventually, I got used to it. Then one morning, Grandpa woke me up early and said it was time to go home. I was so excited that I kept on singing happily. As we pulled up outside our house, my heart started beating faster. I was home! Then a shadow appeared in the doorway, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was my mom and dad. But my dad was in a wheelchair. My mom looked so thin and tired, and my dad had no legs. What had happened? I looked to Grandpa to reassure me, but he looked as nervous as I did. Then in my little voice I said, "Daddy, where are your legs?" He smiled at me, and with his usual loving eyes said, "They got hurt. But hey, what do you think of my wheelchair?" He let me sit on his lap, and Mom pushed us around, and it was so cool. I was way too young to understand what was really going on. All I remember was how many people kept visiting to check on Dad, and that I finally got to try a chocolate egg. That same day, a doctor came to visit, and after he checked on my dad, he came over and patted my head. Then he pulled a chocolate egg out of his bag, and then another one, and another one. 3 chocolate eggs! I couldn't believe it. I was shaking with excitement. The doctor said the gift was from my dad, and that I should thank him. I ran to my dad and said, "Thank you, Daddy." He looked like he was going to cry, and I asked if he was okay, and he just smiled and said, "I'm happy because you're happy. That's all that matters to me." For the first time in my life, I got to try a chocolate egg, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. And the best part was that inside there was a toy. After I opened and ate all 3, I just wanted more. I kept asking my dad when I could get more, and he just laughed. And then I thought, maybe if I studied really hard and was a good girl, I'd get some more. So that's what I did. I focused on my study, and one day I won a medal at school for winning a math contest. I was so excited to show my parents and assumed they'd give me a chocolate egg as a reward. But that's not what happened. They congratulated me, but said it wasn't possible for them to get me another chocolate egg. I don't know why, but this made me so angry. I cried, and I even threw my bag at them, and this made my mom super mad. She scolded me so much that I was scared and ran out the house and went to my grandpa's house. I cried and told him everything, and my grandpa said, "Happiness, the reason your mom got so mad is because she is under too much pressure and has to work so hard to look after you. Now, your dad can't work, so she's in charge, and it's a lot for her to deal with." Then he told me what happened to my dad, and it changed my life forever. That day when my dad was out doing his deliveries, he got an opportunity to do some overtime, which he jumped at the chance to do so he could buy me my chocolate eggs. On his way home, he stopped to buy them for me, and then because he was so tired, as he was leaving the store, he got hit by a drunk driver. He was hit so hard he lost both his legs. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been so selfish? If it weren't for me demanding a chocolate egg, my dad would still have his legs. I felt so terrible. And so the next day, when I won some candy for the other math contests, I came home and went to my parents. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I want you to have these. You always do your best to give me the sweetest life, and so I wanted to make yours sweeter too." That probably sounds a bit deep for a 6-year-old to say, right? Well, my grandpa taught me that one. My parents were so moved that they almost cried when they hugged me. And even though I didn't understand it at the time, I do now. And it's so true. It's taken me a while, but now that I'm about to move out, I finally understand the life my parents have given me and how sweet it has been. Through this channel, I'd like to send some words to my parents. Mom, Dad, if you're watching this, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Now it's my turn to work hard and make you proud. No matter how hard life gets, I'll persevere, just like you both have, because I'm your happiness.
Hey, it's Jessica. From the outside, my life seemed perfect. My family is wealthy, I'm beautiful, shining bright, and even my job is fancy. But from the inside, I do have a character flaw. It's my short temper that almost caused me to lose everything. I've always been Daddy's little princess, which means that anything I want, I have to get, such as new clothes, a new car, and exotic vacations. Because of this, other girls have always been jealous of me. But Kath was different. She realized there's so much more to me than my designer outfits and glossy hair. Kathy's family lived nearby. You see, my dad was friends with Kath's father, who passed away when she was little. But being the nice guy my dad is, he continued to support them. He paid for Kath's education, so we went to the same school. She was the only friend who could handle my short temper. I know, that wasn't nice, but it was hard dealing with the average girl's jealousy toward me. As a result, there were a few incidents. One time, when I was just a primary student, some girl dared to put on my shirt after sports. She said it was an accident, but as if. I yelled at her that she'd stretched it, and now she owed me a new one. Kath tried to defuse the situation, but she just got caught up in the middle of the shouting match. Literally, as me and this girl were screaming insults at each other across Kath. Then another time, some kids sat in my seat in the canteen, and when I asked them to move, they refused to. I was fuming, so I poured my custard all over them. Seeing as the kids were about to get crazy, Kath passed them a napkin, hurriedly apologized to them, then led me out of there before I covered them in more of my lunch. She understood how mad I got on things, but never got annoyed at me about it. This is why our friendship continued into adulthood. It was perfect to have a friend like Kath to grow up with, but what made my life even more perfect was the arrival of our boy next door. Yes! A new family had just moved in, and my mom told me that a cute boy my age was going around meeting people. I ran out to suss it out and find Kath standing on her front porch and talking to a super cute guy. I swished out my hair and tottered over to them. "Hi, Kath." I smiled at her. Then I turned to him and said, Hi there. We definitely haven't met before, 'cause there's no way I'd forget you. He smiled back and introduced himself as Andrew and said he lived on that block. I sat down on the couch in Kath's house and did my research on Andrew and found out he was a pretty famous influencer. His dad ran off with another woman and started a new family, so Andrew lives with his mom and Nan. And best of all, he was single. I pulled on Kath's arm and insisted that she help me beg Andrew as my man. She looked a little awkward at first, but then she reluctantly agreed to help. I persuaded Kath to pretend that she lost her phone, then I went round to Andrew's and begged him to come and help us look for it. He spent the whole afternoon trying to help us look for it, only to hear it buzzing in my pocket. Oops. Then one time, well, this wasn't planned, but I managed to get one of my new heels stuck in a drain cover. I was standing there yelling at it when Andrew walked past and told me to take my shoe off. I refused. Did he have any idea how expensive they were? He just laughed and told me to lean on him while he carefully unwedged my shoe. Whose heart wouldn't melt for this gentle guy? After that, we started to talk more, and then chatted every day. He had a sense of humor and was very gentle toward me. It is so wonderful to know that he was impressed by how cute I was, hiding Kat's phone in my pocket to find a chance to make friends. How embarrassing, but seemed like he liked that. After 2 months, he asked me out on a date, and soon we became an official couple. I loved being around his family, as his mom and grandma were so sweet and friendly. Then my dad said he needed me to go on a 3-month business trip in San Diego. I didn't want to leave Andrew for so long, but there was nothing I could do about it. Ugh, being an adult sucked sometimes. I just had to pack up and take a flight to San Diego, then finish the job as quickly as possible. Little did I know how terrible things could happen in the next 3 months. One night, my mom called me up. She was furious, and at first, I couldn't work out what she was saying. Finally, she calmed down enough for me to make her words out. Jess, I found the DNA test hidden away in one of your father's filing cabinets. Kath is his biological daughter. This whole time, he's been lying to us. I cannot put up with this. I'm divorcing him, and I won't be happy until he's left with nothing. What? Kath was my sister? No, it couldn't be. I called up Kath to get to the bottom of this. As soon as she picked up, I screamed at her. Your dad's my dad. How could you keep this a secret? You're trash, and so's your mom. You're both vile, ugly gold diggers, and I hate you both. Kath spluttered out. What? Huh? I don't understand. You heard me. You're trash, and so's your mom. She's nothing more than a man-eating, money-obsessed liar, and I hate her. Sobbing, Kath replied, Don't talk about my mom like that. This only made me angrier, so I yelled, I will say what I want to. I hate you, and I hate her. I hope you both fall down a pothole and never get out. Suddenly, I heard a voice say in the background, Who are you talking to? And why are you so upset? I knew that voice. It was Andrew's. Why was he with Kath? I was about to scream out at her to stay away from my man, but she hung up. I immediately tried calling Andrew, but he didn't answer. I was so angry I screamed out, then went into the kitchen and started smashing glasses onto the floor and swiping things out of the cupboards. The next day, Andrew called me. I thought he was going to try and worm his way out of what he did, so I answered with a, Oh, hi, Andrew. It's nice to finally hear from you. He replied, Hi, Jess. Look, I have something important to tell you. It's my grandma. She's in the hospital, and I can't afford the medical bills. I hate asking, but please, could I borrow some money? Furious, I yelled, Who do you think you are? You did the dirty behind my back, and now you have the cheek to ask for my help? It's none of my business, dude. He fell silent, then hung up. At first, I was fuming. How dare he do that to me? But once I had time to calm down, I thought maybe I had overreacted a tiny bit. I I could have given him a chance to explain, so I tried calling him again, but he didn't answer. I called Kath, and in my calmest voice, I asked her to tell me what was going on. She said she had no idea that my dad was also her real dad, and it was a lot for her to process. Then she said that she was only around at Andrew's last night because his grandma had a fever, and she was trying to help, but then her fever worsened, so she was taken to the hospital. I felt pretty bad about it all, so I tried calling Andrew again to sort all this mess out, but he'd blocked my number. I transferred him some money over towards his grandma's expenses, but he sent it straight back to me. It was so hard being so far away from Andrew and not being able to go and talk things through with him. I missed him like crazy. Because of this, I confided in Kath loads, and she kept me in the loop about how Andrew's grandma was. Apparently, she wasn't well at all. Then, one day, she came up with an idea to help. She told me to send money to her account, and she'd give it to Andrew, and tell him it was from her. Then, when his grandma was better, she'd tell Andrew the truth about where the money came from, and he was sure to realize how much I cared for him and forgive me. I thought this was a great idea, so I sent Kath the money. Then things got weird. She went super quiet and then stopped talking to me altogether. Then 2 months later, through social media, I found out that Andrew was getting married. To Kath! What? After having a screaming frenzy, I calmed down enough to book a flight home. I took an Uber to Andrew's house and pounded on his door. He answered, and on seeing me, he slammed the door in my face. I wasn't leaving until he spoke to me, so I sat on his doorstep. It was only when it started to rain that he eventually opened the door, and in a gruff tone said, "Okay, you have 2 minutes. Then I want you off my property for good." Look, I know you're mad, and I'm sorry, but why are you ignoring me? I tried to make amends for what I did. I sent you the money. I know. I sent it straight back, remember? He grunted. Not that money. The money that Kath gave to you and said was from me. What? That money was from her, not you. You're jealous. You found out I was marrying her, and you're here to ruin our lives. No, I'm not. Please, it was me. I wanted to help. I pleaded, but he tutted, then slammed the door again. I stood there, a soggy mess, and his words sunk in. Kath had lied to Andrew about the money. Why would she do that? Furious, I stormed around to her house and was about to press the buzzer down until she answered when the door opened, and I saw Kath stepping out with Andrew's mom. I jumped out of sight and listened. Andrew's mom was thanking her for all her help and saying how much she couldn't wait for her to be her daughter-in-law. What? As soon as his mom walked off, I jumped out of hiding and confronted Kath. You're a liar! Kath was surprised seeing me, but then she just shrugged and said, whatever, then walked toward her door. He's my man now, not yours, she added, looking back at me. You traitor! I screamed at her as I charged towards her. We got into a fight, and there was a lot of hair pulling. Finally, Kath managed to get through her entrance door and lock me out. She grinned at me through the window, so I shouted at her, Kath, you just wait! You won't get away with this! A few days passed, and their wedding day arrived. It was in some super swanky golf resort. I tried sneaking in through the entrance, but 2 guards stopped me. Ugh! Kath must have pre-warned them about me. So I had to find another way in, which involved climbing through a tiny gap in the hedge. A bodycon dress wasn't my best choice, and I had twigs in my hair and grass stains all over me. Still, out of breath, I showed up at the aisle and waved the evidence of bank statements and messages between me and Kath in Andrew's face, and shouted, Look! This is all the proof you need to show that I sent the money to Kath to help your grandma, and she's a filthy liar! Andrew looked shocked, but he took the evidence from me. No, she's making it up! Kath's eyes widened in alarm as she tried to grab the evidence out of Andrew's hands. Seeing her reaction, he pulled it away from her and looked through it, his face falling when he discovered the truth. How could you lie to me about this? He stared at her. You told me that Jess cut all contact with you. Teary-eyed, Kath glared at me and said, "You get everything! The nice clothes and the lavish lifestyle, yet you act like a spoiled brat. I was sick of hiding in your shadow and defending you for all your childish outbursts. I liked Andrew from the beginning, but no, you had to have him." Through gritted teeth, Andrew told her, "It's over, Kath. I never want to see you ever again." After that, she rushed up the aisle in a frenzy of white fabric and sobs. Geez, talk about making an exit. That was 3 months ago, and a lot has changed since then. My dad eventually managed to persuade Mum to forgive him, although he had to buy her a new car and take her on a month-long island getaway. Also, she insisted that she never wanted to see Kath or her mum ever again, so Dad arranged for them to move to another city. This worked for me, as I never wanted to see Kath again either. I know I have a short temper, and I overreact sometimes, but I honestly believed that Kath was my friend. It hurt knowing that she didn't care about me at all. She just wanted my life. As for Andrew and me, now we're back together, and there's no way I'm letting my short temper cause me to lose him again. All of this could have been avoided if I hadn't let my anger blindside me. I should have trusted him from the start and heard him out. So now, if I feel anger overtaking my thoughts, I will go and pace the yard first to calm down. I may look like a crazy person, but it works a treat. You see that sad girl sitting there in a flood of tears? Yeah, I know, she's pretty hard to miss. Well, that was me a few months ago. My boyfriend had literally just broken up with me, and I had to pack my stuff out of his place ASAP with a resentful heart. But thinking back, if he hadn't broken my heart, I wouldn't have fallen into this super awkward and ridiculous situation. Oh, I forgot. I'm Ava. I'm 22, and I suck at love. So, anyway, after crying like a newborn, I realized I needed a trip away to free my mind, just like Julia Roberts' character did in the movie Eat, Pray, Love. But I could only afford to do the low-budget version. So I went on Airbnb and found a reasonably priced room to rent in this idyllic beach house. And it gets even better. The owner, Hazel, is out most of the time, so it would be like renting the whole house with the price of one room. Awesome! Reserved! I needed to get out of this emotional hellhole ASAP. As expected, Hazel wasn't home when I arrived, and I had to find the hidden key under a plant pot by the door and let myself in. And oh my, it was like stepping into a life-size retro dollhouse. From the chic furniture to the funky wallpaper, I loved it here. This Hazel girl has got some taste. Ooh, there was even a record player. If I'd have known, I would have brought my vinyls with me. But hey, her collection wasn't too shabby. I have to admit that the idea of having a cool friend like this Hazel girl sounded pretty awesome. I was determined to actually meet her because, yeah, it's been 5 wonderful days staying here and I still haven't run into her. So one night, I settled down in the living room and watched a movie while waiting for her to come home. She eventually showed up at 2 a.m. Ugh, this girl wasn't kidding about coming home late. I greeted her and said, "Hey, I saw you have an Exacta 35mm film camera. That's so cool. Also, would you mind if I take a look at your vinyls?" She looked a bit confused and replied, "I have a what?" "Oh, you mean those rusty old things? They're my brother's. I doubt he'd mind. He always talks to me non-stop about them. So I think he'd be happy there's someone in this house who speaks the same language as him." Ha! Oh, they're her brothers? How very interesting. This got me thinking. Is he handsome? And what about his personality? Is he an arty type with a kind soul? Daydreaming about this mystery guy became a regular occurrence for me. Oh gosh, was I crushing on a guy I'd never even met? How desperate was I? One day I came home from grocery shopping. I was totally exhausted. So I threw the groceries in the kitchen and jumped straight onto the pile of blankets on my bed. Only it wasn't just the simple blankets. What? Someone was under them. We banged heads. Ouch! I removed the blankets to catch this pervert out. Huh? I know this guy. It was my ex. What in God's name was he doing here? Oh, for the record, this wasn't my current ex. This was Nolan. We used to date back in high school, but I'd not spoken to him in a long time. So it turns out he's Hazel's mystery brother. Ew. This whole time I'd been accidentally crushing on my jerky ex-boyfriend. This made sense now, as we always did have lots in common, but ugh. Thank you, universe, for ruining my vacation. With a dagger stare, I asked him why he had the audacity to be napping in my bed. He snorted, then said, "Your bed? This is my house, and my room. The question is, what are you doing here?" Reluctantly, I explained everything to him, and it turns out he was meant to be away on a 2-month business trip, so Hazel put his room on Airbnb without asking him. The problem being, he came back early. He just shrugged and said, "But I'm home now, so can you please take your stuff and get out of here? I'll get Hazel to refund you or whatever." This made me mad. I'd paid for the room. I had rights, so I was staying put. So I told him, "I'm not going anywhere. You'll just have to sleep on the couch." He didn't seem happy about it. In fact, he grumbled to himself as he left the room. But at least he left. I thought this would be it, but oh, how wrong I was. And that's when the war for the bedroom began. The next morning, I awoke to hear these weird squawking noises. Then I felt something flap in my face. Sleepily, I tried to whack it away and opened my eyes. Staring back at me was this massive gull. Ugh! Nolan! There were about a dozen of them hanging out in my room, all pecking and flapping around my stuff. It took me over an hour to shoo them out of the window. Afterward, I was so mad that I locked myself in the bathroom. After 30 minutes, Nolan thudded on the door. He urgently needed to use it. I opened the door with a smirk on my face and brushed past him. I soon heard his disgruntled shouts. Yep, I'd wrapped the toilet paper with duct tape. Ha! I wasn't done with him yet, so that evening I hid some cookie crumbs on the couch, and he woke up the next day covered in ant bites. He was like a real-life dot-to-dot. Yes, it's 2-1, loser. This went on for a couple of days. Nolan switched the toaster settings, so my breakfast was ruined. Yuck. So I sneakily downloaded a fake cracked screen app on his phone and placed it on the floor. When he picked up his phone, he totally freaked out and started blaming his dog. It was so funny. All this pranking was exhausting, so I was kind of relieved when Nolan went out one night, and I could just chill on the couch and watch a movie. Suddenly, the power went out. Great. The switch must have tripped or something. I put on the torch on my phone and was about to go and check it out when my phone rang. All I could hear was someone deep breathing into it. What the hell? I hung up and my body started to shake. All of a sudden, the door burst open and Ghostface was standing there. Terrified, I held my head and screamed like a banshee. But then I heard somebody call my name. "Ava! Ava! It's me, Nolan. It's okay." I was so relieved to see him that I jumped into his arms and cried into his sweater. "Please don't cry. I've got you," he said in a soft voice while he held me. I felt so secure and safe. What was that he was holding in his hand? It was a ghost face mask. It was him! He knew I hated horror movies. What a jerk! I pushed him away and shouted, "What the hell? Are you crazy?" He just smiled and replied, "It was worth it, 'cause the hug was so sweet." Man, I hate this jerk. After that, I avoided him. So, okay, I did catch myself looking over at him and getting this weird, warm feeling. One time, he was playing with his dog on the beach, and I watched on from the porch. Did I have a crush on my ex? My God, I hope not, 'cause that would be pathetic. But I had to admit that, although his pranks were really annoying, they'd also been kind of fun. It made me reminisce on the old days when we were together, and we were so happy back then. But nothing lasts forever. Hazel appeared with 2 cups of coffee, and we started chatting. I told her how annoying her brother was. She laughed, then replied, "I know, sorry. I didn't know you guys used to date. I wouldn't have rented the room to you if I had. I get that it must be awkward for you, especially as you were the one who broke up with him, right? I did what? He was the one who broke up with me because he was moving away at the time and couldn't handle the long-distance relationship. And worse, he did it over a freaking letter. She looked at me confused, then said, "Oh, that's peculiar, as he told me he wrote you a letter telling you about his feelings. Then you shouted at him that it was over." I replied, "Part of his letter said, 'I love you and all, but this long-distance stuff is like madly scary.' So it kinda seemed obvious to me that he wanted to end things." She shook her head. "No, I swear he just wanted to tell you how much he loved you. But obviously, my dearest brother totally sucks at writing. What an idiot. I told him he should have let me proofread his dumb love letter." So it turns out our breakup had all been a misunderstanding. I mean, come on, who writes love letters anymore? Anyway, the past was the past, so I decided it was best to leave it there. Besides, I only had a few days left here. On my last day, I packed my things and said goodbye to Hazel. I had to admit that I was really gonna miss it here. Nolan was nowhere to be found. He must be celebrating because he finally had his room back. Whatever. It's not like I needed to say goodbye to him. I took a cab to the train station. On the way, I couldn't shake Nolan out of my head. He needed to know the truth about the breakup. I couldn't let him think that I was a cruel person back then. "Stop! Turn around!" I shouted out to the cab driver. I ran back into the house. Hazel stared at me in shock. Why aren't you at the train station?" Oh, wow. I couldn't believe they wanted to get rid of me so fast. I was about to leave when Hazel continued. "Nolan just took a cab there to talk to you. Let me call him." Nolan answered the phone and asked me to meet him at a lighthouse nearby. Oh gosh, I was so nervous. What did he want to tell me? Maybe Hazel had told him about our convo the other morning. I spotted him. He was holding something. Gee, I hoped it wasn't another letter. He blushed while looking at me. Then he said in a shy voice, You forgot something in my room." Then he handed me a bag. I opened it, and there was my lingerie! Oh, great! How could I forget them? So he wasn't going to tell me anything. But wait a minute. These weren't mine. And they still had the tags on. He giggled and said, "Sorry, I swear that was the last prank. I just needed a reason to see you. Hazel told me everything. I don't blame you for our breakup. I blame my poor writing skills. The point is, I love you. I just love you. You're the only girl I've ever loved. Still to this day. I've never loved anyone else." Oh gosh, I couldn't believe it. Although I was pretty sure he'd just quoted that from a movie or series or something. As we all know, he sucks with words, and it sounded familiar. Anyway, I threw the bag of lingerie in his face and then wrapped my arms around him. So, from then on, the room war stopped. Not because I was leaving, but because we became roommates. Let me tell you this. Actually, there's not much to tell. Only, when your boyfriend writes you a letter, please make sure you read it very carefully. Actually, scrap that. Just tell him to get with the times and to text you.